This is Litigating History. In this video, we are going to try to make a deep dive into the historical record of a discrete historical fact that is highly disputed to see where the weight of the evidence takes us. In this video, we're going to look at the Battle of Nijmegen on September 17, 1944, and the performance of General James Gavin, commanding officer of the American 82nd Airborne Division. Some claim his decisions on this day resulted in the failure of the entire Operation Market Garden. This is the fourth in a series of videos. In the first video, we discussed how the decision to de-emphasize the Nijmegen Bridge as a day one objective was made by Gavin's boss, Corps Commander General Frederick Browning, not Gavin. In the second video, we discussed why this was a rational military decision based upon the pre-drop intelligence. In the third video, we discussed Gavin's day one orders and the awkward way they were followed. In this fourth video, we are going to discuss the initial bridge defenses and what plan of attack might have succeeded on day one. There were reports that the bridge was only lightly defended on day one until the SS arrived. Is that true? If you are watching this video, I assume you are very familiar with Operation Market Garden in World War II. If not, I'd suggest you go back and watch the first 3 videos in this series. They have good information in them. Anyway, this is the 82nd Division's graphic history of Operation Market, the airborne portion of Market Garden. This pamphlet has maps, charts, graphs, and a narrative of the 82nd's operation during Market Garden. This map was prepared by the 82nd during or shortly after the war. This one shows downtown Nijmegen and the 82nd's various efforts to seize the bridges over the Wall River. This is the traffic circle where the Day 1 battle was centered around. Around 10 p.m., A Company, 1st Battalion, 508 Parachute Infantry Regiment, tired of waiting for B Company, went in alone following a Dutch guide. They went straight through the middle of the built-up city. According to most historians, when they reached the traffic circle, half-tracks pulled up and discharged their SS troops. A fierce firefight ensued between the elite U.S. paratroopers and the elite SS. Company B finally arrived to help fend off the SS counterattack. They battled all night, but it was a stalemate, and the paratroopers could get no closer to the bridge. But is this what really happened? While the battle at the traffic circle raged, there were reports that a control station for the explosives on the bridge were located at a post office. I added these orange thoroughfares to the map to show where I understand the post office to have been. Major Adams, commanding officer of A Company, led a platoon on a special mission to take out this control station. He seized the post office, which was defended by Germans, and he burnt the building down. But when he tried to return to his company, he found himself cut off. He and his platoon were forced to hole up in a nearby warehouse for 2 days until contact was made by the British tanks. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, on the more direct route to the highway bridge, a small patrol from C Company, a platoon and the battalion intelligence section with a radio, had been sent into town to test the bridge defenses and radio back to battalion. They were stopped here before reaching the bridge. Unfortunately, the radio did not work and no one heard from this patrol until the next morning. The next morning, the morning of the 18th, G Company, 3rd Battalion, 508 Parachute Infantry Regiment, made a more serious attempt on the bridge at approximately the same spot. This attempt was also led by Dutch volunteers right through town. They encountered fierce resistance and could not get any closer to the bridge than the C Company patrol. This area to the east-northeast of Nijmegen was not built up, had no buildings, and except for this creek referred to as the Het Meer, it was mostly flat and covered with vegetation. General Gavin referred to this area as the Mud Flats to the east of town. In his pre-jump instructions, Gavin directed Lieutenant Colonel Lindquist to attack the bridge with a small force, not to exceed a battalion, and he suggested an approach toward the bridge via these mudflats. However, with reports from the Dutch underground that the bridge was only lightly defended by a handful of men, Lindquist determined that it would be best to follow the Dutch guides through town straight to the bridge, so an attack via these mudflats never took place. However, if companies A and B could have coordinated their movements and approached the bridge via these mudflats, they could have avoided the prepared defenses and seized the south side of the bridge. It is an interesting what if. Could they have seized the bridge? Could they have held it? We will never know. The answer to that what if can only be answered with an understanding of exactly what was the initial defense of the Nijmegen Bridge on September 17, 1944. The reports were that it was held only by 17 enlisted men and an NCO, and the myth is that if the bridge had been attacked sooner, it could have been easily taken. But the delay in making an attempt on the bridge by the 82nd gave SS reinforcements time to get there and save the day. Is all that true? This is Gavin's own book, Airborne Warfare. According to pre-jump intelligence, it was assumed that Nijmegen would be well defended and the intention of an entire regimental combat team would be necessary. There was no way that the 82nd could spare that if it was to seize all of its other objectives. Nevertheless, Gavin instructed Lindquist to make an attempt on the bridge with a force not to exceed a battalion, just in case the intelligence was wrong. However, after they landed, they received reports from Dutch civilians that the bridge was only guarded by 18 Germans. This is MacDonald in the official U.S. Army history, the Siegfried Line. As usual, Noordijk's excellent history, All-American All the Way, has more detail. According to Major Shields Warren, commanding officer of the 1st Battalion, the Dutchman has a name. Gert van Hees was the member of the Dutch underground that told Lindquist that the bridge was only defended by 17 men and an NCO. Van Hees even volunteered to guide the battalion into town. Most reports concerning Mr. Van Hees portray him as a patriotic and loyal Dutchman. However, if he is the same Dutch guide described in Major Adams's report, then at least one percipient witness has a difference of opinion about his loyalty. Anyway, once Gavin finally got the 508 off its bottom, Lieutenant Colonel Lindquist, commanding officer of the 508 Parachute Infantry Regiment, ordered Warren and the 1st Battalion to take the bridge. As A Company entered the traffic circle, a half-track full of SS troopers showed up and jumped out of the vehicle, and the all-night fight for the traffic circle started. This is Kershaw's It Never Snows in September, a well-researched history of Market Garden from the German perspective. He tells a similar story. He has a whole SS motor convoy stopping and troopers jumping out at the other side of the traffic circle. The 10th SS Panzer Division had won the race between them and the 82nd Airborne to reach the bridge first. The SS had come to the rescue. Even MacDonald acknowledges that the last chance to easily and quickly seize the bridge had just passed. So, what were the initial bridge defenses? First off, let me say right here, those Dutch reports of just 18 men guarding the bridge are nonsense. Similar to, and just as believable as, the report of 1,000 tanks in the Reichswald. It is impossible that there were only that few men. The pre-jump photographic evidence showed heavy flak in the immediate Nijmegen area to defend the bridges from air attack. Even counting only the gun crews gives you many times more manpower than those Dutch reports. So what was really there? Kershaw describes the initial defenses. A Colonel Henke, commanding a parachute training regimental staff, was put in command of all of the troops in the Nijmegen area and ordered to defend the bridges. This force was referred to as Kampfgruppe Henke. German sources tend to be biased and interested in extolling the superiority of the German fighting man. In this instance, they do so by portraying Kampfgruppe Henke as hopelessly outmatched by the highly trained and experienced 82nd Airborne, making their defense all the more heroic. Anyway, Kershaw describes this hodgepodge collection of troops making up Kampfgruppe Henke. It had 3 companies of the Erstadt Battalion 6 from Werkkreis 6. These are poor troops, older men, wounded, etc., but they do represent manpower, cannon fodder, you might say. One of these old men, well placed and manning a machine gun in the narrow streets of Nijmegen, could stop a battalion. It had 1 company of the Hermann Goering Training Regiment. These troops were responsible for recruiting and training replacements for the Hermann Goering Division. They were not battle-hardened veterans, but decent manpower led by experienced instructors. So Kampfgruppe Henke had a backbone of decent troops. It had an NCO school. I cannot tell how many of them there were, but these would be good troops and leaders too. There was Henke's staff, which I assume were good troops and good leaders. There were some reservists of questionable quality, and some railway station guards. Not the best, but not the worst troops either. All told, Kampfgruppe Henke had about 750 men. Most were poor troops, but it was well led and had a backbone of decent troops. In addition to that, there was the Luftwaffe Flak. This is the 82nd Airborne Division's pre-jump intelligence report. I discussed this before. It reported that the flak in the area had been sizably increased. Recent photographic evidence showed 10 light and 33 heavy guns in the immediate Nijmegen area, and those guns were sighted and exercised for a dual ground role. Even without Kampfgruppe Henke, this would represent a defense to be contended with. Assuming the photographic evidence was accurate, the gun crews themselves represented manpower that would be a problem, between 248 to 367 men. By this stage of the war, we could expect the number to be towards the lower side of that estimate. Nevertheless, that is why the Dutch report of only 18 men defending the bridge makes no sense. Of course, those gun crews were not armed with just Kar 98s. They were armed with lethal 88mm cannon or nasty 20mm automatic cannon, sighted and exercised in a dual ground role. With this flak backing up the manpower of Kampfgruppe Henke, we are talking about a very credible defense. Cornelius Ryan, while researching a bridge too far, obtained a study prepared by General Heinz Harmel, commanding general of the 10th SS Panzer Division for the U.S. Army post-war. In that report, Harmel describes the components of Kampfgruppe Henke. Again, he is playing the refs by trying to portray the Germans as hopelessly outmatched, making their ultimate defense of the bridge all the more heroic. According to this translation, the troops were assembled in great haste under Colonel Henke of Parachute Training Regiment 1. He had the guards from the train station. He had local defense personnel. He had members of a police music corps, band members, I guess, a small marine detachment, river troops maybe, stragglers, that could mean anything, a few members of the armed SS. I'm not sure what that means and who these SS are or how many, but that could explain later reports of SS during the night counterattack, and other units, whatever that means. Harmel is vague, but this motley crew was put together as Kampfgruppe or Attack Group Henke. It had an overall strength of 750 men, which is the number cited by Kershaw and most other sources, with a backbone provided by Henke's training staff. And again, this Kampfgruppe was backed up by the Luftwaffe Flak, used in a dual role against ground targets. Harmel undersells again, claiming only a small number of flak batteries, but he provides no numbers as to what he considers small. The pre-jump photographic evidence showed heavy flak in this immediate Nijmegen area. This account by Harmel is more or less consistent with Kershaw's and might even have been Kershaw's primary source. So Henke quickly assembled a credible defense of the Nijmegen Bridge from the troops already in the Nijmegen area. The second part of the myth about the night battle is that the outmatched bridge defenders were rescued at the last minute by SS troops racing down from Arnhem to save the day. The question is, when did the SS arrive, and could any have arrived that night to save the day? Here is Russell Hart's Mission Impossible. We discussed this chapter in the first video. He performed deep research into the mobilization of the German replacement army to fend off Operation Market Garden. He identifies the 3 replacement army companies that made up part of Kampfgruppe Henke as coming from the 1st Military District, 6th Home Defense Training Battalion, part of the newly mobilized 406th Division. He acknowledges that these 3 battalions are the same 3 battalions identified by Kershaw, but these are the low-quality troops making up the bulk of Kampfgruppe Henke. Where are the SS? Hart then recognizes that Henke did in fact receive SS reinforcements. Around 5 p.m., long before the 82nd could have secured the high ground and mounted an attack, Captain Grabner's SS Recon Battalion showed up in Nijmegen. Hart misidentifies this unit as the 10th SS Armored Recon Battalion. It was actually the 9th SS Armored Recon Battalion, but Grabner's unit was detached from the 9th SS Hohenstaufen Division and attached to the 10th SS Frundsberg Division with orders to defend the Nijmegen Bridge, so that might explain Hart's confusion. Anyway, when Grabner arrived in Nijmegen, he saw that Henke had already devised a stout defense of the bridge and there was no attack in progress. And while the bridges at Nijmegen seemed secure, Grabner was learning that in his rear, Colonel Frost had seized the north side of the Arnhem Bridge. Grabner was considered impulsive, and he turned around to attempt to recover the Arnhem Bridge, where he and most of his battalion would make a headlong attack across the bridge and be practically wiped out. Grabner himself would be killed. Hart says that Grabner must have left a small force in Nijmegen, but his use of the word likely makes this assertion seem like speculation, perhaps to explain later reports of SS in Nijmegen. Kershaw tells basically the same story. Captain Grabner commanded the 9th SS Hohenstaufen Recon Battalion. His recon battalion raced through the area between Arnhem and Nijmegen, referred to as the Island, looking for Allied paratroopers. But since there were no landings north of Nijmegen, Grabner found nothing. He then raced down to Nijmegen, where he was relieved to see the bridges adequately defended by Kampfgruppe Henke. With Nijmegen secure and the north side of the Arnhem Bridge in British hands, Grabner returned to Arnhem, where he would be shot down. The defense of the Nijmegen bridges were once again left solely in Henke's hands. Here is Saunders' account of SS reinforcements arriving in Nijmegen just as the 82nd Airborne Division approached the traffic circle. His source is a Corporal Blue, who provided a very colorful account, including shooting down an SS captain with a short burst from his Tommy gun. We know there was not an SS captain in Nijmegen that night. Captain Grabner was on his way back to Arnhem, but Corporal Blue's account is used by Saunders to explain that SS reinforcements arrived just in time at the traffic circle. Here is Noordijk's account of the same encounter with the SS. He describes a chaotic scene with half-tracks hit with rocket launchers, SS troops leaping off in hand-to-hand combat. Noordijk's source was also Corporal Blue, who goes on again to describe killing that SS captain. In fact, here is the full 2 pages describing the encounter with the SS. The blue highlighted text is the account from Corporal Blue. His account is extremely vivid and dramatic. It makes for a great story. Obviously, that is why Noordijk adopted so much of Blue's story. The yellow highlighted text is the account from Lieutenant Colonel Shields Warren, commanding officer of the 1st Battalion. His account is not nearly as interesting, and he makes no mention of encountering the SS. Corporal Blue is the only one to mention the SS. Here is the account of Major Adams, commanding officer of A Company that night. He makes no mention of the SS. He was trapped in the city for several days and made no mention of SS. Here is the account of Captain Millsap, commanding officer of B Company, the other company in Nijmegen that night. He makes no mention of encountering the SS either. The only account that I have seen mentioning a run-in with the SS was Corporal Blue's colorful account. MacDonald also accepts the story that the SS arrived just in time, but even with all of the U.S. Army's post-war resources, MacDonald cannot figure out which SS unit it could be. To try to figure out who these SS troops were would just be conjectural. Kershaw also adopted the story of the SS arriving just in time during the night of the 17th. He has a footnote 16 supporting that assertion. What does it say? Unfortunately, his footnote does not link to any primary source. He just says that they were likely an advance guard from the Battalion Uling, 10th SS, accompanied by engineers. Likely. That sounds like speculation again. Looking back on Kershaw's account, there's that word again, conjecture. Kershaw wrote an entire book on Market Garden, specifically from the German perspective, with access to German archives, and he could not figure out who were these SS troops in Nijmegen on the night of the 17th. Everyone is forced to use conjecture to explain Corporal Blue's account because German sources are pretty clear that no SS arrived in Nijmegen on the night of the 17th. From the Rhine collection and the report of General Harmel, his report makes it clear his troops could not get through Arnhem because the north side of the Arnhem Bridge was blocked by Colonel Frost. The first elements of the 10th SS to make it to Nijmegen was his Pioneer Company to make sure the bridge was wired for destruction, and they did not arrive in Nijmegen until the morning of the 18th, and the ferry for his combat elements did not start even running until the 18th. Ryan's team even had a chance to interview Harmel. He again confirmed that the engineers did not arrive until the morning of the 18th. In his interview, he also confirmed that the first ferry crossings at Pannerden were during the night of the 1819, so Corporal Blue could not have encountered any part of the 10th SS on the night of the 17th. So here is the battlefield in Nijmegen for the bridges again. Here in red is the highway bridge. Here in orange is a railroad bridge. The blue shows the defensive areas secured by Kampfgruppe Henke. He had 2 defensive bridgeheads on the south side of the river defending each bridge and one facing north in the event that the Allies had dropped troops on the island. He had about 750 men, or possibly up to 1,000 if you include the Luftwaffe gun crews. Most of his troops were second-rate, but they were well led and had a backbone of some decent troops. As demonstrated repeatedly across the Western Front, a German force of this nature, while on the defensive, could make a very good showing of itself and extract a heavy cost to root them out of their positions. As I said, they were well led, and Henke's defense was not static. He had strong pockets to the south in the city to give him advance warning of an approaching enemy, and he would aggressively counterattack if the opportunity presented itself, which it did. Around 5 p.m., Grabner's Armored Recon Battalion arrives. He brings with him the welcome news that there were no landings to the north, so Henke could safely concentrate his forces to the south of the river. Grabner was obviously satisfied that Henke had the bridge defense well in hand because he returned to Arnhem. It is suggested that he may have left a recon platoon, but that looks like conjecture. He might have left a few SS troops in Nijmegen, but I have not seen any definitive proof. Then, around 10 p.m., A Company finally starts moving into the city. They are following a Dutch guide straight into the middle of the city on a circuitous route to the bridge. They encounter token resistance at the traffic circle, but brush it aside. Then Warren sends Adam on his mission to destroy the control station for the bridge explosives. While Adams is away, Henke launches a counterattack against A Company at the traffic circle. The fighting is fierce. Finally, B Company arrives, and the opposing forces trade blows all night around the traffic circle. It was this counterattack that cut off Adams's patrol and stranded him in Nijmegen for the next few days. In the morning, A Company was pretty well disorganized, and both companies were eventually withdrawn and ordered to the Groesbeek Heights, where they would need to make another attack to clear the landing zones just before reinforcements arrived. Kampfgruppe Henke survived the night, and its defensive lines had not even really been tested. The SS were not there, but the 10th SS were really on the way and soon would be arriving. However, the 82nd's attack that night was not that impressive. It was weak, only 2 companies strong. It was not coordinated. Both companies were to go in together, but they ended up going in piecemeal. And finally, it relied upon those reports that the bridge was only lightly defended. With only a few troops on the bridge, Lindquist figured it was okay to trust the Dutch guide and follow him straight into town. Whether they were betrayed by the Dutch guide or not, the effect was the same. They were led straight into the jaws of the German defense in a cramped urban area. The ultimate what if is the question of what would have happened if Lindquist had followed Gavin's suggestion and attacked via the mudflats to the east instead of trusting the Dutch guide. It would have been challenging, but if the 2 companies could have coordinated their movement in the pitch black over unfamiliar ground and crossed the creek before being detected in the dark, there was a real possibility that Warren could have seized at least the south side of the bridge. If they could have, they would have been in a situation similar to Frost and Arnhem. Then, could they have held it? That would have flipped the deck. Henke would then have to attack instead of defend. His replacement troops would not have been nearly as effective on the attack. Could Warren have held out until reinforced by the 82nd or the 30th Corps reached Nijmegen? I think so, but as they say, that is all conjecture. So, was the bridge only lightly defended by 18 Germans? No, that was impossible. The bridge was guarded by more men than that in just the Luftwaffe gun crews manning the flak, and shortly after the landing, Colonel Henke started assembling his 750-man strong Kampfgruppe. By 5 p.m., Captain Grabner was of the opinion that the bridges in Nijmegen were already well defended. Was there a dramatic race between the SS and the 82nd Airborne to see who could get to the Nijmegen Bridge first, won by the SS? It's possible, but probably not. I'm not going to call Corporal Blue a liar, but he does not appear to me to be an accurate historian. He could not have killed an SS captain, and other portions of his account just seem to be too colorful and too dramatic. He could be telling the truth, but I doubt it. Just as every German tank is a Tiger and all German artillery were 88s, every counter-attacking German was probably believed to be SS. That sounds a lot better on retelling than a middle-aged German factory worker from a second-rate replacement battalion, even if he's led by an NCO from a crack parachute training regiment. The weight of the evidence suggests that no SS troops arrived that night. Captain Grabner had come and gone, and the 10th Pioneers would not get there until the morning. Rather, I think a poorly coordinated attack by the 82nd just stumbled into a well-laid-out defense by Kampfgruppe Henke. So how does this all affect our evaluation of General Gavin on September 17, 1944? Well, the directive from Browning to secure all other objectives first and the imperative to hold the heights resulted in necessarily a delay of an attack on the bridge until darkness. That delay allowed the fast-acting Colonel Henke to organize his camp group for defense, so that would be on Browning. Nevertheless, given the restrictions imposed on Gavin's use of his forces by Browning's directives, Gavin still devised a day one assault plan that had a realistic chance to capture the bridge. A surprise assault by the better part of a battalion under cover of darkness via the mudflats to the east. We will never know if this plan would have worked because Lindquist trusted the word of a Dutchman, Gert van Hees, that the bridge was only lightly defended and they could afford to go straight through the town. That was the fatal mistake, taking both intelligence and tactical advice from a civilian of unknown loyalty. Van Hees was certainly wrong about the defenses on the bridge, and going through the built-up area of the city played right into the hands of troops like Kampfgruppe Henke. Being on the defensive in an urban area gave the second-rate German troops a chance to stand up against elite parachute infantry. If you disagree with my conclusions, let me know in the comments. If you have any sources that dispute my findings, I'm willing to be proven wrong. Let me know. See you later.